Sean, I'm just here holding the slide control.
Is that Jody?
This is Jody.
Okay, hi Jody. Your sound is a little bit muffled.
It's muffled?
A little bit. For me, it is. How do I sound for you?
You sound very clear, and you're up on the main screen. You sound very clear. So I will advance the slide, Shauna.
Okay. Great.
You go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead. Shauna, we're just going to wait a couple minutes because we're early.
Sure.
It's 12:25 here, and our session starts at 12:30.
Perfect. And a quick question before we begin, Jody. The first 3 slides, are those yours?
Why did the screen look like? Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Just trying to get you back on screen.
Okay. I look better in the dark.
Everything's. Give me just 1 minute. I'm going to go see where they went. That's why we have a few minutes, and it's good.
Great. And so, Jody, are yours the first 3 slides?
I thought you and I were sort of doing the first one. We're setting the stage.
Okay.
I have them marked at the bottom.
Okay. I don't see any for the first 3. That's my question.
1 second. So, Shauna, here was my plan. We will start with the title slide, but we're not going to actually speak to the overview slide because that's for anyone who gets the deck after the fact.
Okay.
And we weren't going to speak to the outcomes because we only have 25 minutes and we're just going to introduce the topic, and we're going to 2 and 3 are in there for anyone who has the deck after the fact so it makes sense to them. And we're basically going to start with an introduction. We're going to start with that introduction.
Perfect. Makes sense. Got it.
And I'll kick us off, and then I'll advance this one. I'm going to get the slides back on.
Wonderful. And so you are essentially Kim Kennedy. Thank you, Jody. You're essentially Kim Kennedy today. And Jody.
I am Jody masquerading as Kim.
I'm so glad to have you.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. short person. That's what we do. Okay, perfect. Great. Shauna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. Wonderful. I'm going to get us started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. I will not be walking around this presentation as I have been asked not. I'm a walker. My name is Jody Tavares, and I am here with my colleague. Shauna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shauna Garrett. I'm the president and CEO of EduNova Cooperative Limited, coming to you live from rainy Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Thank you so much for joining us, Shauna. Shauna and I are here today to deliver a presentation on the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, A Change Journey. I am here representing Kim Kennedy with the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency. So we thought that we would start with a quick introduction slide. I will give a brief overview of the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, and then I will hand off to my colleague, Shauna, for an overview of it. Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, exactly what it sounds like. It stewards accessible trades training system for the province of Nova Scotia. It is composed of an industry-led apprenticeship board committee, trade advisory committees, agency staff, and of course the chief executive officer. NSAA stands out in Canada as the inaugural apprenticeship authority to implement MyCreds to embrace MyCreds to facilitate the issuance of secure digital credentials to apprentices and certified trade professionals throughout Nova Scotia. And as I mentioned before, I am here representing Kim Kennedy, the Chief Operating Officer of the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, who is leading the implementation of MyCreds at the NSAA. And I'll hand off now to Shauna.
Thank you, Jody. And I might say you've done a wonderful job of representing Kim Kennedy. So thank you for doing that for us. I am currently the president and CEO of EduNova Cooperative. EduNova is a nonprofit located in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We are a provincial cooperative that represents all of the K-12 public sector. We represent all of the universities, colleges, language sector. And we also work with all of those that are issuing credentials, including the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency. So our job is to champion Nova Scotia as a leader in the international student experience space while advancing social and economic growth in the province. So we are currently the only cooperative of our kind in Canada. There are some similar provinces doing similar work, mainly funded by the government. We are at arm's length from government. So essentially, we bring all of our members together to work with students to make Nova Scotia a place that they would want to come, students would want to come and study, stay, and thrive. So as an organization, we have been moving to digital credentialing as part of our digitization of the province. And we're looking to empower both our apprentices and our employers. And the reason that we're doing this is we're looking to facilitate smoother transition between our training programs, our credentials, and within the workforce by maintaining transparency and trust in the province. And one of the main reasons that we are doing this is Nova Scotia has been looking to double population by 2030. So the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration, which the Apprenticeship Agency rests, has created a very aggressive target to increase population. So part of our mission as well is to increase population, in particular in the international student space. So we have onboarded MyCreds as one of the digital credential frameworks to assist us in smoothing those transitions for students coming into the province, throughout their trade, and then into their career or into their workforce, which is why we wanted to work with the NSAA to onboard MyCreds. And I will hand it back to Jody.
Thank you so much. So we are now going to move into the story of the change with NSAA. And we are going to hand right back to Shona to deliver some information on what is the case for change, why change.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody. So the NSAA is essentially the training certification system in Nova Scotia, and they operate under the authority of the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualification Act. And essentially, as I mentioned, we are looking to double population in the province, and we have a challenge in our economy. There are a number of sectors that we have not been able to fill with skills tradespeople. So a couple of those gaping holes right now in Nova Scotia are the energy sector and construction. So one of the rationales in the case for change is to try to create easier pathways for some of our foreign workers, some of our international students, and some of our Nova Scotians to be able to access credentials. We wanted to work with a trusted and also a nonprofit tech stack to be able to help us promote this kind of credential exchange. So we knew that MyCreds was already operating in this space. And we also knew that they were willing to work with us to stagger the implementation of this rollout, because NSAA had other technological transformations that were going on at the same time. The other thing is we had provincial government funding, both from the Department of Advanced Education, where we were able to successfully onboard MyCreds to all of our universities and colleges, knowing that our colleges in particular have a number of credentials that these clients would be able to exchange, and also from the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration. So both of those government departments got together and were willing to put some money behind, approximately, I think the two projects in total ended up being 3 million Canadian dollars, so that we could launch the MyCreds network across the entire province for every student that was having a learning experience in the province, so that they could connect with colleges, connect with workforce, connect with employers, because, and I'll move right into our next slide explaining what MyCreds is. This was the best both partner, network, and product that we could find, because this offers students and learners a 24/7 virtual credential exchange highway that is credential holder provisioned. So essentially, we wanted to put the agency in the hands of the learners. We know that this was a trusted ecosystem that was curated by registrars in support of credential holder mobility. And we also knew that the students that we onboarded in universities and colleges had a very seamless transition to this kind of new technology. We knew that from our case for change with our universities and colleges that it was mainly the staff that had concerns with the technology. But there was a concern because of the different demographic of the learners with the apprenticeship agency. As they were more mature learners, they were in later stages of their educational journeys, that they may not be able to adapt to this kind of new technology, that the pushback or the argument against this kind of virtual exchange was that they were not going to be able to create their own portal and figure out how they would have to go about doing this kind of learner exchange with the virtual wallet. But as it turned out, I won't get too far ahead of myself, that fear ended up being unfounded. So we have been able to, with this agency, onboard a number of our credentials, including transcripts from a partner college. And now the agency is looking to increase the use of micro-credentials and the creation of micro-credentials to line up with the provincial micro-credential framework, which includes a large trades component as part of the provincial framework to upskill and reskill Nova Scotians and onboard new Canadians to the province to be able to fill some of our labor market gaps. And with that, I will continue on with a few of our successes. We've been able to be successful in launching this network. And as of the date that we created this report, there were 1,322 official documents. Now, why that's impressive is because that was only a 1-month time frame. So some of the pushback we had for change when we were creating this case for change was that these learners would not be able to figure it out. They might not be comfortable not having a form to fill out or going to a desk in person. They may push back against trying to be forced, essentially, to do a transaction online. But it was a very few group of learners that did want to do anything online, and at last count, it was less than 1%. So there were 51 official documents shared, which is important because that means students in that 1-month period were already figuring out how to share the provincial documents with other trade organizations, other employers, or other government agencies for funding. And in that period of time, there were 7,700 active registered apprentices who have been positively impacted in Nova Scotia by onboarding to the MyCreds network. So again, why that's important and impressive is because it was done in such a short period of time. And it was done with a group of people that really believed in the technology, the Digitary group, the group with Douglas Cornerstone, and a number of other partners that got together that really believed that this could be done. In the face of some resistance and some pushback with the concept that it was the learners that would be impacted. But as it turns out, the learners were quite positively impacted, and they received the new technology positively. There weren't any jobs lost, which was one of the other fears that the agency staff members had when we were onboarding. all of their jobs were transformed into client-facing roles as opposed to doing data entry of paper forms. So the other piece that is so impressive about this as well is that those folks were very reluctant skeptics at the outset of this project, and were able to buy into the change. So if we think about moving on to our next slide with my colleague Jody, she'll be able to outline a little bit more of the change challenges that existed with the Apprenticeship Agency.
Thanks so much, Shauna. Shauna, you may not know this, but I just did a presentation on change in this room before this. So some of the themes are actually shared, which is actually excellent. So, you know, if we identify change challenges ahead of time, which is one of the approaches that NSAA and Edunova project, along with the MyCreds team, Duke's Cornerstone, you know, if we think about some of those change challenges and identifying them ahead of time, we can neutralize them. And so some of the things that we knew ahead of time was that there were other technical implementations going on into it. We knew that was happening. We identified it. We needed to move quickly to implement under the provincial umbrella. So if the province is moving in this direction and the province is providing this generous funding, we need to move at the same time. That had to be considered. Also, the NSAA had to consider what technology was being sunset. So Shauna's talked a lot about the change on people, but now we're talking process and systems, right? And so what other technology would be sunset because of this implementation? Or was it just a sunset that was happening at the same time? Shauna has touched quite a bit on the ongoing learner for internal because the way that they would change. So that was definitely a challenge. And Shauna's talked about the actual impact on credential holders. I think at the outset, there was, of course, concern about how credential holders would react to the changing process, but they seemed to pick up the change actually right away and become sort of a champion of it because it was picked up so quickly. So those are just some of the identified change challenges in this. And so we'll talk a little bit now about responding to those challenges and just some of the lessons learned. And so one of the things that Kim shared with me when we were discussing how did she respond to challenges internally at the NSAA to make sure that this implementation went smoothly, she couldn't stress enough on a single point of oversight. It's a gauntlet when you're implementing change, and you just have to commit to the gauntlet to get through. And so there were many managers that were managing different aspects of the change, but there was a single change leader with oversight of the implementation so that they could move through that gauntlet of implementation. What Shauna and I have both mentioned previously, considering those change impacts before they happen and planning for them. So being mindful and planful about what the impacts might be. Change leadership. And so that's being available and being ready to make decisions in real time so that a schedule can be adhered to. And that comes back to the first point of the single point of oversight internally at NSAA. And then, of course, tight timelines. Tight timelines are achievable with all of the previous pieces. It was very clear to say teams are supported effectively so they can adhere to the timeline and implement it. Some of the lessons that both Kim and Shauna have put together as part of this journey, I think that it's, for myself, I always like to sit down at the end of a project or at the end of the stage of a project and look at what did I learn from this that I can maybe take differently to my next implementation. Internal discussions with key personnel prior to communication. Prior to initiating onboarding discussions. That helps prime for the change. And some of those topics should include your implementation team. This was a massive change for the NSAA. And it's about having the right resources and enough resources committed to just working on the implementation. Ahead of time, beginning those privacy and security assessments, identifying impacts to the fee structures, platform fee structure, and changes to payment methods. That's another consideration of change that can be considered ahead. Prioritizing your document types. MyCreds itself has over 200 different use cases. So prioritizing, what are we starting with? Because we can't start with everything. So what are we starting with? And then, of course, considering your document brand, right? You never want to get to a point where we're talking. Think about what we want the brand name to look like then. So an opportunity to be done ahead of time. And then, of course, it's never too early to start framing technical requirements. And so things like single sign-on, which are critically important to NSAA, making sure that we have the right technical environment to enable that, creating a CSV ahead of time to support upload patching, all things that now we know ahead of time we can moving forward into a change that's similar. Shauna, did I do that justice?
Mm-hmm. I think you did it more than justice. What I would add to your thorough overview, Jody, is that the lessons learned, again, became, in the space that I was working, more about people and relationships and change management, and less about technology. The technology itself, and leveraging technology and integration with Digitary, with the platform. Once we got to that stage, it was pretty seamless. It was the other pieces of the decision making that were more tricky. And you've already outlined the contract, but the ongoing and the most challenging pieces were that change leadership. Getting buy-in, getting a champion within the government department, being able to work as a nonprofit through some of the bureaucratic hurdles that exist in those spaces, and also getting a champion that was willing to essentially help push things along internally when things got hard, when questions arose, somebody that was able to believe in the project, believe in the vision to make it a better atmosphere, a better environment, a better experience for learners. That was our biggest challenge, was people and less about technology. So in the end, I think there were a lot of lessons learned around key personnel, teams, and building relationships, and the importance of relationships in any kind of project when you're doing change management. Because in the end, it was the relationships that were able to help push this through with very innovative change leaders and change managers.
Shauna, it's funny that you have mentioned this, because this just came up in our previous conversation, that if we think of the three tenements of change, people, processing systems is actually always the least amount of work. It usually goes quite smooth because it's math. 1 + 1 = 2. But it's the people part where you really have to commit the time to caring and pivoting and building relationships and sorting through. So it's great to hear you echo that. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. So I will now open the floor and ask if there are any questions. Okay. I'm just going to check in. Shauna, can you hear? our question?
No, I can't. If you could repeat it for me, Jody.
Shauna, do you want to take that one?
I'm not able to hear the question. If you wouldn't mind repeating it for me.
I will absolutely repeat it because, and I apologize, I thought by giving him the mic, he would hear it, and I was wrong. So we have a gentleman here who does work with nursing regulatory bodies, and the nursing profession has experienced some similar challenges in the desire to bring people in to support healthcare. And so he's asking, when there are detractors, how do you deal with the detractors from moving into this kind of framework? How did that get dealt with NSAA, the detractors?
That's a great question. And it was one of the most challenging aspects of getting this project launched originally. The way that we were able to deal with a detractor, or in our case, a couple of detractors, was having the strong, solid support of the Deputy Minister. So the Deputy Minister of Labour Skills and Immigration was designated as the champion for this project. And we had a change process that if there were detractors that were identified at lower levels, that she made herself available to ensure that she was communicating across the department to all levels of leadership that this project was important, that Labour Skills and Immigration was going to be digitizing, that we would be using the MyCreds National Network in order to make the experience seamless for learners to come to the province and within the province. So it was her solid leadership and the willingness of the project manager in our case to be able to communicate that to the detractors, which largely ended up being the staff members that were on the ground, that were the people whose day-to-day workflow had changed. So those that had been processing transcripts, those had been who had been entering forms. There was fear, there was uncertainty. Whenever those arose, those would get kicked back up to the champion, to our Deputy Minister, and she would have a communication out to make sure that everyone knew that this was the path forward.
And I think that I would add, just in the context of change, so not necessarily to do with NSAA, but as a change, I think there's a lot of work that can be done around the people piece, where you can neutralize people's reaction to change, bringing them along. And there are very particular ways to do it. It's all just based on the neurological reaction. But what Shauna is referencing is sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes really what you need is you need a champion. At a very high level, change champions typically are, that can provide the guidance that says, this is how we're doing it. And I know it's hard, but this is how we're doing it. And so change is difficult. There will always be detractors. But I think with those, if we take those two approaches, you will always be successful. And it's why those change champions are so important. You have someone at a level who can say, I know it's hard, the road might be bumpy, but this is how we're getting there. Does that answer your question?
And Jody, I might add one piece as well, is the team that we worked with at Arook had done so many onboarding processes by that time. They had so much experience. So every time that we encountered a resistor or a detractor or an issue, always Joanne or a member of her team was available to give us an idea that, you know, they'd seen the same thing at another university, another college, another credentialing body. How about try this? So they were also our partners in championing change with lived experience.
Thank you. Great. We're at time, and I don't want to keep anyone from lunch, so I will thank you all for participating. And I will thank my colleague, Shauna Garrett, with Edunova, for being here today. Thanks, Shauna, so much.
Thanks, Jody. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Bye-bye.